Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be talking about the dangers of bowling, the benefits of drinking, the Downsizer Dispatch, plus a whole lot more coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. It is episode 136, and as always, it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
We have a big show to get into tonight. We will be getting into a new study that came out that highlights some benefit from drinking alcohol. So we like to point out some interesting facts that go against the status quo of, we're usually told drinking's bad, but lo and behold, there are some benefits, and we'll be talking about that later on. But first, I wanted to start out by going over to the UK and talking about something that isn't so safe, and that's bowling, Nick. I mean, I always thought it was a perfectly safe sport, something that was fun for the whole family.
Seems relatively low risk, although I have gotten my fingers pinched in between the bowling balls when they come back up.
Yes, that is dangerous, and some people have even had their fingers pulled on because they shove them in the ball too much, and when they throw it down the lane, their fingers
that's
get
just
stuck.
their fault, isn't it?
Well, Nick, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about a much greater danger. This is a danger that took almost $500,000 or 250,000 pounds for the British government to look into. But after a couple of years, they have found that it is very dangerous to the public because they could get crushed in the pin setting machinery if they happen to run down the lane and jump into it while it's setting the pins. They could get crushed. Now, there has never, ever been an incident where a member of the public has been crushed by this equipment, but what if they did go down there to kick over the pins instead of bowling the ball down and the pins crushed them to death? It could happen, and after about $500,000, that's what the Health and Safety Executive Report said. It is much too dangerous. Now, they're not exactly sure what they're going to be doing about this. Recommendations are in the works. One thought that they had was they could put up wood panels between the pins and where the people are throwing the bowling balls. But, quote, because customers need to see the pins and the bowling balls entering the machine, managing the risk of access into the machine from the lanes is more difficult. Yes, you can't just put up wood in front of where the pins are, because then how would you knock over the pins?
Not only can you not see them, you can't hit them.
Right. It's, well, you know, Nick, I was wondering then, if there's never been a member of the public crushed to death, what prompted this study in the first place? I mean, you don't just go launch these government studies for no reason, do you?
Yeah, I think you do. I mean, I would...
Well, actually, they didn't, Nick. They do sometimes. But there was an incident in 2006 where a worker was crushed to death by the machinery. He got a little too close and friendly with it, and it got him. So that was back in 2006 when a technician was crushed. But they're saying this isn't about the technicians. This is about the members of the public safety.
Of course,
and you know what I say, Nick?
Who would go back there?
Well,
Isn't
I
it
say
just
this
common
is
sense?
perfect.
You can see it come down.
This is social Darwinism. We need to weed these people out. If you're stupid enough to get crushed to death by the bowling machinery when you're just doing what you're supposed to, it's time to weed you out of the gene pool. Because you should not be. No. You should not. If you're able to get killed by bowling, it's time to end your genes. Don't reproduce for the next generation, because we really don't need you. I'm sorry.
Bowling really should not be a life and death endeavor.
And it's not.
It's not.
But
because as you said, nobody has ever. There's no record of anybody, a member of the public, ever being crushed by the pin setter, because nobody goes in there, because 90% of us realize that it's a machine that comes down with a big metal bar, and you don't want to be underneath it when it comes down. And the other 10% of people might not be smart enough to figure that out, but they just don't have any initiative to actually go in there and find out.
You know what else is dangerous, Nick? Life. You know, an HSE spokesman said, quote, "The investigation revealed that the machinery used nationally in bowling alleys did not meet the adequate safety features." So they need to add some, but they have no idea. They did spend almost $500,000 to find out that there's not adequate features here, but it did not reveal any way to implement these features. So will they be closing down bowling alleys in Britain? I certainly hope not. I don't think they're going to take it that far, but we have reported on stories where they do similar things. Well, you know what it's probably going to do is just raise insurance costs or something along those lines, or put in some kind of...
Or they'll mandate new safety features, and then bowling alleys are going to have to, take a hit in their profit margins trying to implement these new safety measures, and then you'll see some bowling alleys close. You'll
the fact
see
that they
them
had
not
it
be kept
on,
up as well.
They were ready to put up a board between you and the bowling pins so that you couldn't go back and kick them over on your own. Like, the fact that that crossed their mind and then they admitted that in the report, they're proud of it, and then they realized that you had to see the pins and the ball had to be able to go by a board and hit the pins over. These government folks, Nick. A waste of tax money, if you ask me. But getting on to something that's a little bit more serious, something we've talked about here in the United States a lot, is homeschooling. We've never talked about what it's like in other parts of the world, though. I've actually never even, I guess I've wondered, but I've even looked into it. Is it easier to homeschool people over in the UK? Is it harder? I have no idea until I stumbled across an article that you actually have talking about, how until now it's been less stringent than here in the United States, but now it's getting more stringent in some cases at least.
Yeah, according to the article here, parents have until now not had to register with councils or tell them what they are teaching. Now, in some states in the United States, that is effectively the case, but it varies from state to state here in the U.S. So some states are very, very restrictive, and you have to submit a very detailed curriculum plan. I think California at one point attempted to make it so that you actually had to be certified as a teacher to homeschool your kids. So teachers would have that option, or regular parents could go to school and get a degree, but I don't know if they backed off of that or not. But in some places in the United States, it is very difficult to homeschool. And apparently it was a little bit easier in the United Kingdom. But there is a new proposal on the table that could change that. Parents who teach their own children at home must undergo criminal records checks, say government education inspectors. The estimated 40,000 parents who choose not to send their children to school should be vetted, says Ofsted, which I assume is the office of...
And vetted means you cleared all your criminal background checks?
Yeah, they're checking to make sure that you don't have certain kinds of offenses in your criminal record. It said that parents whose records throw up suspicions should be barred from teaching their own children. Parents who teach at home must be vetted, education inspectors say. Vetting to root out any record of violence against children would be by the Criminal Records Bureau. So essentially, it's a criminal background check. Like here in the United States, you probably have an FBI background check run on you if you're going to work with children in a professional capacity. But you would need this if you wanted to educate your own children. Yeah, doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
But the kids are still living with you, so if it's a danger for them to live with you and sleep in a house in a room next to you, if it's dangerous, wouldn't it be equal? I mean,
you sound like a lot of the critics in this article. There's one guy here who says that it's sheer madness for Ofsted to suggest that parents should be required to undergo CRB checks to be with their children between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. from Monday to Friday during term time. If it's deemed unsafe for children to be with their parents during normal school hours, it is equally unsafe for them to be with their parents in the evenings, at weekends, or on holidays, which makes sense. I mean, yes. The question here is, are we going to do criminal background checks on parents who already have custody of their children in order so that they can educate them at home?
Right, and does a criminal background check mean you're still a danger? I thought that once...
Well, it doesn't, well...
It doesn't mean anything. That could have been years past.
It could work either way. But just because something showed up in your criminal history doesn't mean you're still presently a danger. And just because nothing shows up in your criminal background check doesn't mean you haven't murdered children. It just means you haven't been caught and convicted and the record has not been done away with or lost. So it doesn't really mean too much, in my opinion. And if these parents already have custody of their children, then it seems like that would be a non-issue here.
Right, because if they're safe throughout the rest of the day, what's during the hours of whatever time school is going on matter? Anyways.
It's a very good question, but I guess the educators or the bureaucrats in charge of education in the United Kingdom don't feel the same way.
Yeah. Anyways, it is interesting. I also think
it's still just a proposal, though. It hasn't been actually enacted.
Hopefully it won't, because I mean that argument right there, the fact that they're with them all of their hours of the day should land it right on its face. What I am interested in, though, is what other countries, how homeschooling works in other countries. I mean, we've talked extensively about all sorts of different laws in different states, both on the radio show as well as on Free Minds TV here. but really don't know much about other countries. So if you live in another country, you watch the show, you want to let us know what it's like for you, fmtv@freemindsmedia.org is the email address where you can let us know what it's like. Do you agree with homeschooling, disagree? What's it like wherever you live? So personally, I like the idea of homeschooling. I think that it can be very beneficial for some people. Would I want to homeschool my kids? Well, I think there's a social aspect as well, but then again, a lot of homeschooling kids, they get the interaction with peer groups coming together too. So I think that there's definitely benefits. There's also some drawbacks as well. So to each their own is what I like to say. And I mean, a parent knows best, at least better than some nameless teacher in some cases. Some teachers are great, some aren't, but at least a parent knows best for their own kids. That's how I think.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, there are drawbacks and there are benefits. And I think that individual parents are going to make that choice. There's also always the option, it's not just public school or homeschooling, there's also the option of private schools. And then there's charter schools, which are sort of kind of state-run, sort of kind of private. But, there are some options out there. And I'm glad, in New Hampshire, it's fairly accessible if you want to homeschool. But, of course, there are still some states in the U.S. that, as I understand it, are less restrictive. So, I do like the idea of letting parents decide how they want to educate their children. Because, quite frankly, I mean, you'll hear all kinds of scare tactics used talking about, well, what if parents don't educate their children well, or, they just let them eat Twinkies all day and play video games and they don't actually make the kids learn anything. But when you think about where most parents are coming from, that's not very likely to happen. And when you think about how much the public education system has failed well over a generation, at this point, generations of American kids, as far as delivering a quality education, then what are you afraid of? It's very likely not going to be any worse than sending your kid to public school. And of course, there are public schools that are better than others, but overall, the public education system in the United States is terrible. I mean, it's just terrible. Academic performance among young people in the U.S. is god-awful. So what are you worried about? I mean, it's not very likely we're going to do worse.
There's people throwing stuff at the TV.
It's true.
But because they're upset. And I do want to just throw out a caveat. I work in a school, and my wife is a public school teacher. So we say these things being on the side.
That doesn't mean the education system is delivering in the United States, and it's not.
There's something wrong. And throwing money at the issue isn't going to fix everything. There's some core issues here that we need to fix. Anyways, we do need to move on, Nick. It's that time in the show where we let people know how they can influence their government, at least if they're watching here in the United States, on the federal level at least, with the Downsizer Dispatch. What do you got on tap for us this week?
Well, this week is sort of just recapping what Downsize DC did as far as progress in November. In November, they hit a new milestone for membership at 29,000 members. And they sent 63,973 letters to Congress. Quite a bit when you think about it. The thing I like about DownsizeDC.org is really there's sort of a lobbying group for smaller government. And if you're somebody out there who thinks that the federal government is too big, you don't want to spend as much in taxes, or you certainly don't want to spend more, maybe you're just somebody who wants to halt the growth of government where it is. If you're one of those people, DownsizeDC.org is really one of the few, if not the only voice that you have as far as lobbying power in Washington, D.C. Because most lobbyists going to Congress, they're being paid by a special interest who wants some kind of new regulation or more government spending that they can somehow get contracts off of. The vast majority of lobbyists on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., they're not looking for smaller government. They're looking for government contracts and government regulations that will somehow benefit them and hurt their competition. So if you are somebody who wants smaller government and you haven't done it yet, go to downsizedc.org and check it out. And if you're someone who's been going to the website, using it to contact your representatives, elected officials on a regular basis, then think about giving them a donation, because it's not free for them to maintain that service. There's a cost associated with doing that, and there's a cost associated with outreach, and growing membership is important. So if you would like to see DownsizeDC.org grow, you can always give them a contribution as well.
Absolutely, but I'd like to throw out there, not before you give us a contribution too, because it's not free to do this show, and we do need your help and support, and you can help us out by logging onto our website, freemindsmedia.org, and you can sign up for the members area, $3 a month or $30 a year. You get tons in return, or you can just send us a donation as well. I mean, you like the show, you've been watching it, you think it's important to get this message out there, let us continue, because we're not going to be able to continue without your support. Anyways, when we come back, we are going to be talking about a man who's been awarded $50,000 for giving a police officer the middle finger, as well as getting into some benefits from heavy binge drinking. All that and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV. Free Minds TV is brought to you in part by Life Productions for your basic and semi-pro video production needs. From full wedding and event coverage to DVD authoring and distributions, lifeproductions.com. That's lyfproductions.com.
Well, thank you, Spencer.
This is Mark Edge from Free Talk Live, and you're watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
All right, Nick, I think we should just jump right into the stories here and talk about a man who has been awarded $50,000 by the Pittsburgh City Council after he sued a police officer because the police officer issued him a ticket for flipping the police officer off. Interesting, huh? Wouldn't it be nice if we could all cash in this way? Well, let's get into the story here. David Hackbart, 35, of Butler, sued the city after an April 2006 incident in which he displayed his middle finger to a fellow motorist and then a police officer. The police officer pulled him over and issued him a violation. It looks like that Hackbart sued for First Amendment freedom of speech rights and won and was awarded $50,000 for it. Now, Nick, I see where this man is coming from.
Well, maybe the cop cut him off.
Well,
it's not polite to flip somebody off when they cut you off, but
who's paying this money, Nick?
The taxpayers?
The taxpayers are paying this money. So the taxpayers are being sued. And that just seems a little bit unfair to me. I mean...
Well, the taxpayers are liable for what the city does. Essentially. I mean, the city is supposedly representing the taxpayers. It's a very abstract argument. But in essence, when officials in government who are supposedly working for you and representing you, they're supposed to be your agents in a roundabout way. When they screw up, you as the taxpayer are liable, which is a really crappy system because when taxpayers have their rights violated or they're suing for process, essentially in a roundabout way, they're paying for the reward that they're getting from the system in this case. I mean, if you take the government to court, let's say you sue your local town, then all your neighbors are going to, in a roundabout way, end up paying for what some police officer or judge or city official did.
See, and that's what I don't like. I think there needs to be some kind of accountability on the prosecutor and police officers and on the city and on the government when they're going after people. See, right now, there's nothing wrong with losing. They're going to get paid either way. When a prosecutor or a police officer decides they want to press charges against someone and they're completely asinine charges, it doesn't matter if they win or lose. They collect the same paycheck no matter what. So I think there needs to be some kind of an incentive to only bring charges against people when there's actual evidence to show that they're guilty. Let's not just collect a paycheck because one person's easy to go after and it's much more work to go after real criminals. Let's go after the real criminals who are hurting other people. And this man who's flipping people off, it sounds like he's just being an idiot. I mean, probably not worth tax money, citing him for disorderly conduct. I mean, I don't know how he got $50,000 out of it. That just seems completely absurd to me.
Well, it's punitive damages. I mean, whether you agree with what he did or not, the finding of the court in this case was that his civil rights, his First Amendment rights, were violated.
Hey, I've gone to traffic court a few times, and I've always had the tickets thrown out. And I've never gotten $50,000 for it.
But there was the issue there wasn't whether or not you had your rights violated. And what apparently the court is deciding here is that, in fact, the officer and through him the city did violate this individual's rights. So they have to pay. At which it makes sense to me. It seems like it'd be a lot it'd make a lot more sense to get $500 out of the officer.
Yeah, because you had to waste a day of work probably going and fighting the ticket, and that's what I think you should get. Is
it
you
seems
win
like it'd be a better deterrent to get $500 out of the officer than to get $50,000 out of the city.
Yeah, but I mean, because where's the deterrent in that? I don't know.
No, it's not like the officer lost any money. He might have gotten a slap on the wrist, or maybe.
Maybe if that. I mean, but they're told to do these. It seems to me there needs to be some kind of a loser pay system, and that's it. I mean, it happens in the civil as well as criminal cases. I mean, you can sue anybody and you lose, and nothing happens. You just probably lost. If I decide I'm going to sue you for something, whatever it is, you flip me off. Now I'm offended. I could take you to court for it. I lose. Well, see you later. You just spent how much money on missing work and lawyer fees and all that stuff. It seems like there needs to be some kind of a loser pay system, not only on the civil side, but also some kind of a deterrent on the criminal side as well, so that you don't have prosecutors, you don't have city attorneys, you don't have the government pressing charges against people that really don't need charges pressed against them. There needs to be some kind of a deterrent so that you can't just file charges or sue someone willy-nilly. Anyways, we do need to move on. I want to get into some news that didn't splash huge on the national media scene, but I did pick it up, having to do with alcohol drinking and men's hearts. Now, before we get into this newest article that you've got, Nick, I do want to say that a few months back, we were talking about a new study that showed that drinking alcohol is good for women's bones.
I think the study specifically was that moderate amounts of beer were good for women's bones. I think it was what was
beer
actually studied, not necessarily alcohol.
But that wasn't anything to do with men at that point. That was all the benefits were for women. And so we know that there were a lot of men who felt left out by that, so we combed the internet and dug around, and we found some good benefits if you're a man and you like to imbibe in some adult beverages.
Now, for all of those of you out there who probably drink more than you should have, it might not be terrible news in one regard. A Spanish research team involving more than 15,500 men and 26,000 women found large quantities of alcohol could be beneficial for men. Female drinkers did not benefit to the same extent, the study found. Experts are critical, warning heavy binge drinking can increase the risk of other diseases. Yeah, obviously there are some health risks associated with drinking, with alcohol responsible for 1.8 million deaths globally per year. The study was conducted in Spain, a country with relatively high rates of alcohol consumption and low rates of coronary heart disease. The research involved men and women aged between 29 and 69 who were asked to document their lifetime drinking habits and were followed for 10 years. Crucially, the research team claimed to have eliminated sick abstainers. These are people who drank at one time, but they have underlying health problems that have forced them or encouraged them to quit drinking. So supposedly this study tried to account for that possible skewing of the data, which at one point is why critics said that, well, the people who drink a lot are having low rates of heart attacks because they're not concerned about their health because they haven't had health problems in the past. But supposedly that was eliminated. The research, led by the Basque Public Health Department, placed the participants into 6 categories, from never drinking to drinking more than 90 grams of alcohol each day. That would be equivalent to consuming about 8 bottles of wine a week or 28 pints of lager. So it's about 4 beers a day. And like I said, there are a lot of critics out here. While it does appear to reduce the risk of coronary heart disease, there are other forms of problems that your heart can get that can be accentuated by drinking, and the risk for stroke goes up significantly if you are a moderate to heavy drinker.
Absolutely, and we've talked about this many times. I mean, really, it's probably better off if you're not drinking, or at least smaller quantities. But it is interesting how you said, what, 8 million deaths worldwide? Somewhere around
1.8 million deaths.
Oh, 1.8 million deaths worldwide. Wow. Did they take away the numbers that are potentially saved from coronary heart disease because they drank?
No, they probably did not.
See, and that's an issue that lies not only in drinking statistics, but smoking statistics and drug-related statistics.
Even prescription drugs.
Whatever you're talking about, well, it kills this many people a year, and you start adding up all the percentages of people who are killed by smoking and tobacco and car accidents and cocaine and heroin, and you just start adding up all the different ways people die and all the ways things can kill you, and it's going to be in the thousands of percentages because they don't account for the other numbers. The people who, well, took away this many years of your life, but it added this many years, so we're going to average it out to this. They don't account for that a lot of times, and you can really use statistics to skew any amount of data. So when you do see statistics like it kills 1.8 million people or whatever it is, take into account that who's reporting on these statistics and what do they want you to believe. And I'm not going either way on this. I'm just saying whenever you are looking at information, you can use statistics to vary the data quite wildly.
Yeah, and they didn't really get into the mechanics too much. Apparently the scientists still say they don't really understand exactly how it works, but it appears that drinking a significant amount of alcohol on a fairly regular basis increases the amount of good cholesterol in your system, which reduces your risk of having a coronary heart disease. So it's interesting. I guess, I mean, when you look at it in the aggregate, it's probably not enough to offset the other health risks that go along with heavy drinking, like liver problems or kidney problems.
But it does mean all those statistics you say are a little bit wrong.
They are a little, yeah. I mean, no doubt. You're gonna, when you see statistics telling you smoking is bad for you, fatty food is bad for you, drinking is bad for you, everything's going to kill you, except they neglect to mention that, well, it's not all bad. Yes, it increases your risk of this particular medical condition, but it actually reduces your risk of this one and this one. Right. So moderation is generally a pretty good rule with anything. And I just think it's important that people be aware that there are risks with any of these kinds of behaviors, and there are also benefits. But usually benefits to some kind of activity are underreported. Right. I mean, how many articles do you see about studies saying running is good for you, or eating carrots is good for you? You don't see as many of those things making the news because people know that, and they don't tend to focus on positive things that really require them, you know, if they use the data, would require them to work if they wanted to change their lifestyle. They just tend to focus on negative things that they can quit doing.
All right. With that, that'll do it for us. We're all out of time. I'm just encouraging you guys to think outside the box a little bit differently when you see certain news stories. Don't take everything at face value. Look into it yourself and judge for yourself. Anyways, you can visit us online at freemindsmedia.org. Join us this Sunday and every Sunday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a live edition of Free Minds Radio. If it's not on your radio station, catch it live on the web or download the podcast via iTunes. And it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Take it easy.